Let's talk about the games that ruined Pokemon for me. So the two main games that ruined Pokemon for me are Metaphor ReFantazio and Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Because both of these games have shown me how incredible turn-based combat can be, that when you go back to old Pokemon games, it just feels like you're playing shovelware, like it's not even close. So in Pokemon, especially the newer ones, there's a huge emphasis on just counter swapping. So if your opponent's running like a water type Pokemon, just switch to grass or electric and then use like Thunderbolt and one-shot them. So it just becomes totally mindless. Like there's no interesting decision making you're doing. And the Pokemon games are so heavily balanced in favor of the player that there's almost never any need to use status effect abilities. Whereas I think Metaphor and Expedition 33 are both much harder games, and so they require you to think a lot more critically about what moves you're using, making sure that you are prepared before even going into an encounter. Status moves are also necessary in these games. In Metaphor, especially as you get into the later game, there's a lot of fights that take a really long time, and so you need these sort of status effect abilities to sustain your team through those longer encounters. And so I would describe playing Metaphor as playing a really complex game of chess, and I would describe Expedition 33 as playing a really high skill fighting game where you have to have perfectly timed inputs to be able to win. So I've already touched on how in these games you have to think more critically about the moves that you're picking just because of the difficulty of them, but there's some core underlying systems in the combat design that don't exist in Pokemon games that make you have to think really critically about what move you pick and when. So in Metaphor, you have MP, which each of your special moves uses some, and you also have turn icons. So in each fight, you have a certain number of turns that you're able to take. And certain moves like blocking or hitting a critical hit only use half a turn icon. So you basically get an extra turn. And so why I describe Metaphor like chess is because you're constantly thinking about how do you put the correct characters in for a certain dungeon, or how do you pick certain moves at certain times in order to maximize the amount of turns you get each round. Because you can start a turn with 3 turn icons and then you end up getting 6 moves if you play it right. And so you're doing all of this in service of using as little MP as possible because you need it for these really long dungeons and you don't want to get to the boss fight and not have any moves that you can use. Whereas in Expedition 33, you have MP, but you start each fight with the same amount, and then you get more by parrying enemy attacks. And so this is why I think of Expedition 33 as more of a fighting game, because you are examining the enemy's moveset, you're trying to time perfectly when you're going to counter them, and so it feels a lot more brawly in that way. So last year I played through Pokemon Emerald, and I grew up as a Gen 3 kid. Like I always played Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, Leaf Green. But I think that might be the last time I ever replay an older Pokemon game, because the combat systems in comparison to modern turn-based games are just so simplistic. And unfortunately, nostalgia can only get me so far these days. So I love Metaphor, I love Clair Obscur, but fuck, these games ruined Pokemon for me.